On a cold February morning in 2005, in a quiet suburb of Prince George's County, Maryland, a young woman left her apartment for work and never came home. Her name was Jennifer Hawkins, 28 years old, a dental hygienist with a bright smile and plans to return to school that fall. Her car was found 3 days later in a wooded area near the Patuxent River, doors locked, keys missing, no signs of struggle. For nearly 2 decades, her case remained open but dormant, filed away in metal cabinets alongside hundreds of other unsolved matters. Then, in the spring of 2024, a single phone call changed everything. An arrest was made, a name was released, and a community that had long ago moved on suddenly found itself staring backward into a darkness it thought had passed. The question everyone asked was not who, but how had this person remained hidden in plain sight for so long? The town of Bowie sits in the heart of Prince George's County, a sprawling collection of planned communities and older neighborhoods that grew rapidly in the decades following World War II. Tree-lined streets stretch outward from the center, modest ranch houses giving way to newer developments with 2-car garages and basketball hoops mounted above them. In 2005, Bowie was a place where people knew their neighbors, where children rode bicycles until the streetlights came on, where the high school football games drew crowds on Friday nights. It was not the kind of place where young women vanished without explanation. Jennifer Hawkins had lived in Bowie her entire life. She graduated from Bowie High School in 1995, worked part-time at a local pharmacy while attending community college, and eventually earned her certification in dental hygiene. Those who knew her said she was dependable, the kind of person who showed up early and stayed late, who remembered birthdays and asked about your family. She lived alone in a small apartment complex off Route 197, a tidy 2-bedroom unit on the 2nd floor. Her parents, Robert and Susan Hawkins, lived 15 minutes away in the same house where Jennifer had grown up. She visited them every Sunday for dinner. The morning of February 14, 2005, began like any other. The temperature hovered near freezing, the sky a flat gray that promised snow but delivered none. Jennifer woke at 6:30, showered, dressed in dark blue scrubs. She made coffee in the small kitchen, poured it into a travel mug with a cartoon tooth printed on the side. Her neighbor across the hall, an elderly man named Mr. Carlson, saw her leaving at 7:15. He was retrieving his newspaper. They exchanged good mornings. She smiled, said something about the cold. He watched her walk to her car, a silver Honda Civic, and drive away. That was the last confirmed sighting of Jennifer Hawkins alive. She did not arrive at work. The dental office where she worked, a family practice in nearby Laurel, opened at 8. By 8:30, the receptionist called Jennifer's cell phone. No answer. By 9, the office manager called her apartment. Nothing. At 9:45, concerned and uncertain, they called her parents. Robert Hawkins arrived at Jennifer's apartment by 10:30. He had a spare key. The apartment was neat, undisturbed. Her bed was made. Dishes sat drying in the rack beside the sink. Her purse was gone, along with her keys and phone, but her laptop remained on the small desk in the living room, plugged in and charging. He called the police. A missing person report was filed that afternoon. For those who have ever waited for someone who does not come home, who have felt the minutes stretch into hours and the hours into something worse, you understand the particular terror of that first night. The Hawkins family sat in their living room, calling Jennifer's phone over and over, hearing it ring and ring before going to voicemail. They called friends, former classmates, anyone who might have heard from her. No one had. The search began in earnest the following morning. Prince George's County Police assigned detectives to the case. Jennifer's vehicle description was broadcast to patrol units throughout the region. Her photograph, a recent snapshot from a family gathering, appeared on the local news that evening. Tips began to trickle in. Someone thought they saw a silver Honda at a gas station in Crofton. Another caller reported a similar car parked behind a shopping center in Greenbelt. None of the leads went anywhere. On February 17th, 3 days after Jennifer disappeared, a man walking his dog in a wooded area near the Patuxent River noticed something through the trees. A vehicle, partially hidden behind overgrown brush, about 30 yards from the nearest trail. He called the police. When officers arrived and ran the plates, they confirmed what the family had been dreading. It was Jennifer's car. The vehicle was locked. The windows were intact. There were no visible signs of damage, no blood, no evidence of struggle inside. The keys were not in the ignition or anywhere in the car. Jennifer's purse was not inside. Her phone was not inside. The car appeared to have been carefully parked, not abandoned in haste. The odometer showed an additional 12 miles beyond what would have been required for the drive from her apartment to her workplace. Those 12 miles became critical. Investigators processed the scene meticulously. They photographed the car from every angle, dusted for fingerprints, collected fibers and trace evidence. They searched the surrounding woods with cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating equipment. They found nothing. No body, no clothing, no weapon, no indication of what had happened after the car was parked. Detectives retraced Jennifer's known movements. Surveillance footage from a convenience store near her apartment complex showed her stopping there at 7:20 on the morning of February 14th. She purchased a bottle of water and a granola bar. The clerk remembered her. She seemed normal, unhurried. The timestamp on the receipt matched the time. From there, the trail went cold. Those who knew Jennifer described her as cautious, not someone who would pick up a stranger or deviate from her routine without reason. She had no known enemies, no recent disputes or conflicts. Her bank account showed no unusual activity. Her phone records revealed nothing suspicious, just routine calls to family and friends. Detectives interviewed her coworkers, her neighbors, her former boyfriends. Everyone said the same thing. Jennifer was kind, reliable, content with her life. There was no reason for her to vanish voluntarily. Yet she was gone. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. Volunteers organized search parties, combing through parks and nature trails throughout Prince George's County. Flyers with Jennifer's photograph appeared on telephone poles and storefront windows. A Facebook group dedicated to finding her grew to over 5,000 members within a week. Local churches held vigils. Her parents appeared on the news, pleading for information, for anyone who might have seen anything. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves about the lack of evidence, the absence of any clear direction. In cases like this, there is usually something. A witness, a footprint, a discarded item. Here, there was only the car, parked neatly in the woods, and the silence that followed. Weeks passed. The search effort slowed. The media moved on to other stories. The Facebook group grew quieter. Detectives continued to investigate, following every lead that came in, but the leads grew fewer and less credible. Jennifer's case was not officially declared cold, but resources were redirected. Her file remained open, a stack of reports and photographs and unanswered questions sitting in a detective's office. The Hawkins family could not move on. They kept Jennifer's apartment exactly as it was for 6 months, paying the rent each month, hoping she might walk through the door. Eventually, they packed her belongings and brought them home. Her mother kept her clothes in the spare bedroom closet. Her father drove past the location where her car was found once a week, just to see if something had changed, if some new detail had emerged. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt the slow erosion of certainty, you know the particular anguish of suspicion without proof. As the first year passed, the Hawkins family began to notice things they had not wanted to see before. Small inconsistencies, strange coincidences. a name that kept appearing in the margins of their daughter's life. David Brennan was 34 years old in 2005, a mechanic who worked at a repair shop in Bowie. He had grown up in the area, attended the same high school as Jennifer, though he was several years older. They had reconnected at a mutual friend's barbecue the previous summer. Those who saw them together said they seemed friendly, nothing more. Jennifer mentioned him to her mother once, in passing, said he had offered to look at her car because it was making a strange noise. Susan Hawkins thought nothing of it at the time. After Jennifer disappeared, detectives interviewed David Brennan as part of their sweep of everyone in her social circle. He told them he barely knew her, that they had spoken a few times at social gatherings but were not close. He said he had not seen her in weeks before she vanished. He appeared cooperative, even concerned. He had an alibi for the morning of February 14th. He was at work by 7, clocked in on time, stayed until 5. Multiple coworkers confirmed it. The alibi seemed solid. Detectives moved on. But Susan Hawkins remembered something. A few weeks before Jennifer disappeared, her daughter had mentioned that David had fixed a rattling sound in her car. He had done it for free, said it was a simple fix. Susan had thought it was kind. Now she wondered, had he done something to the car? Had he installed some kind of tracking device, some way to know where Jennifer was? She mentioned this to detectives. They looked into it but found no evidence of tampering. The car had been thoroughly examined. Nothing unusual was discovered. Still, the name lingered. The investigation continued for another year, though with diminishing intensity. By early 2007, Jennifer's case was effectively cold. The file remained open, but no new leads emerged. The Hawkins family hired a private investigator who retraced the same ground the police had covered and came to the same dead end. Jennifer's story became one of those local tragedies that people mentioned occasionally, usually when another missing person case made the news. The swing hung still. The toy truck lay on its side. Clear's throat. In the spring of 2008, Robert and Susan Hawkins made the decision to leave Bowie. They could not bear to drive past the places their daughter had lived and worked, could not endure the sight of her high school or the apartment complex where she had started her adult life. They moved to a small town in western Maryland, near the mountains, where nothing reminded them of what they had lost. They brought Jennifer's belongings with them, boxed and labeled, stored in a spare bedroom that became a kind of shrine. Life continued in the way it does after tragedy, a slow procession of days that blend together without meaning. Susan stopped working. Robert took early retirement. They became isolated, their world shrinking to the boundaries of their property. Friends stopped calling. Invitations stopped coming. Grief has a way of making people uncomfortable, and prolonged grief even more so. Years passed. 5, then 10, then 15. Jennifer's case remained unsolved. The detectives who had initially worked it retired or moved to other departments. The evidence sat in storage, cataloged and filed. The Hawkins family held out a fragile hope that someday, somehow, they would get answers. But as time stretched on, that hope grew thinner. Then, in March 2023, something changed. A woman named Sarah Mitchell contacted the Prince George's County Police Department with information about the Jennifer Hawkins case. Sarah had been a teenager in 2005, living in Bowie, attending the same high school Jennifer had graduated from years earlier. She said she had information she should have shared long ago, but fear had kept her silent. She was ready to talk now. Sarah told detectives that in the weeks before Jennifer disappeared, she had witnessed something troubling. She worked part-time at a coffee shop near the dental office where Jennifer was employed. She often saw Jennifer come in during her lunch break. On one particular afternoon in late January 2005, Sarah saw a man waiting outside the coffee shop, watching through the window. When Jennifer left, he followed her to her car. Sarah could not hear what they said, but their body language suggested tension. Jennifer appeared uncomfortable. The man seemed insistent, leaning close, gesturing with his hands. Eventually, Jennifer got in her car and drove away. The man stood there for a moment, then walked to his own vehicle, a dark blue pickup truck. Sarah had not thought much of it at the time, but after Jennifer vanished, she remembered the encounter. She was frightened, uncertain whether what she had seen mattered. She was only 16 years old. She convinced herself it was nothing. Years later, the memory haunted her. She decided she had to come forward. Detectives asked Sarah if she could identify the man. She said she thought she could. They showed her a series of photographs, old images from the original investigation. When she saw David Brennan's photo, she paused. She said, "That might be him. I think that's him." It was not enough for an arrest, not after so many years, not based on the uncertain recollection of a teenager who had waited 18 years to come forward. But it was enough to reopen the case. Detectives began to reinvestigate David Brennan. They discovered that he had left Maryland in 2010, moved to Pennsylvania, and worked at various repair shops before settling in a small town near Harrisburg. He was married now, had 2 children, lived a quiet life. On the surface, nothing appeared suspicious. But when detectives dug deeper, they found something troubling. In 2012, David Brennan's wife had filed a restraining order against him, citing controlling behavior and verbal aggression. The order was temporary and was not renewed, but the allegations were documented. His wife described a man who needed to know where she was at all times, who checked her phone, who became enraged if she deviated from her routine. The marriage had deteriorated, though they remained together. Detectives also reviewed old phone records, something that had been difficult in 2005, but was now accessible through archived digital data. They discovered that David Brennan's phone had pinged off a cell tower near the Patuxent River on the morning of February 14, 2005, at approximately 8:30. This was nearly an hour after he had clocked in at work. The shop where he worked was 15 miles in the opposite direction. When confronted with this information during a new interview in late 2023, David Brennan insisted there must be some mistake. He said he was at work all day. But when detectives pressed him, he changed his story. He said he might have stepped out briefly, maybe to run an errand. He could not remember exactly. It had been so long ago. Detectives obtained a search warrant for his current residence in Pennsylvania. In the garage, they found a small metal box tucked behind a workbench. Inside the box were items that did not belong to his wife or children: a woman's watch, a set of car keys, a cell phone, old and uncharged. When forensic technicians examined the keys and phone, they confirmed what detectives already suspected. They belonged to Jennifer Hawkins. Clears throat. For those who have ever felt the weight of truth arriving too late, who have known the bitter satisfaction of justice that cannot undo what was done, you understand the complex emotion that followed. David Brennan was arrested on April 12, 2024, at his home in Pennsylvania. He did not resist. He did not speak. He was transported back to Maryland and charged with the abduction and murder of Jennifer Hawkins. The news spread quickly. Local media outlets in Maryland ran the story continuously for days. The Facebook group that had gone dormant years earlier suddenly surged with activity. People who had known Jennifer, who had searched for her, who had attended vigils, expressed shock and anger. Many said they had always suspected something was wrong. Others insisted they had no idea. David Brennan's attorney entered a plea of not guilty. The case moved slowly through the legal system, as cases of this nature often do. Prosecutors built their case methodically, presenting the phone records, the cell tower data, the items found in his garage. They brought forward Sarah Mitchell, who testified about what she had seen outside the coffee shop. They presented evidence of his controlling behavior, his lies about his whereabouts, his possession of Jennifer's belongings. The defense argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that possession of someone's keys and phone did not prove murder, that cell tower data was imprecise, that memories from nearly 2 decades earlier were unreliable. They painted David Brennan as a man who had been friendly with Jennifer, who had perhaps kept mementos after her disappearance as a way of holding on to someone he had cared about, however inappropriately. They suggested that the real perpetrator remained unknown. But the prosecution had one more piece of evidence, something they had not disclosed publicly. In late 2023, while searching David Brennan's property, cadaver dogs had alerted to an area in the woods behind his old residence in Maryland. The house had been sold years earlier, but investigators obtained permission to excavate. They found remains buried 3 feet down, wrapped in plastic sheeting and deteriorated beyond easy recognition. DNA testing confirmed the remains were those of Jennifer Hawkins. The defense collapsed. In November 2024, facing overwhelming evidence, David Brennan accepted a plea agreement. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and unlawful disposal of remains. In exchange, he received a sentence of 40 years without the possibility of parole. He was required to provide a full account of what had happened. In his statement to the court, David Brennan said that he had become infatuated with Jennifer Hawkins after they reconnected in 2004. He said he had asked her out multiple times, but she had always declined politely. He said he could not accept her rejection. On the morning of February 14, 2005, he left work briefly and drove to a location where he knew she would pass on her way to her job. He flagged her down, pretending his truck had broken down. She stopped to help. He convinced her to drive him to a nearby gas station. Once she diverted from her route, he pulled a weapon and forced her to drive to a secluded area near the Patuxent River. What happened next, he said, was not planned. He said things escalated. He said he panicked. He said he buried her in the woods behind his house, then drove her car to the location where it was later found. He walked back through the trails, retrieved his truck, and returned to work. No one noticed he had been gone. The statement was clinical, devoid of emotion. Jennifer's parents sat in the courtroom and listened. Susan Hawkins wept silently. Robert Hawkins stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable. The case of Jennifer Hawkins, which had remained unsolved for nearly 2 decades, was finally closed. The arrest shocked the community, not because David Brennan was a prominent figure or a trusted member of society, but because he had lived among them for years after committing an unthinkable act, had continued his life while a family suffered, had hidden the truth in a metal box in his garage as though it were something ordinary. The question that haunted many was how he had managed to avoid detection for so long. The answer, as is often the case, was a combination of luck, circumstance, and the limitations of an investigation conducted in an era before digital forensics had advanced to their current state. The cell tower data that ultimately linked him to the crime scene had been available in 2005, but the technology to analyze it precisely had not. The cadaver dogs had not been deployed to his property, because there had been no reason to suspect him beyond a vague unease that could not be articulated or justified. Justice, when it arrived, felt both necessary and insufficient. Jennifer Hawkins had been gone for 19 years. Her parents, now elderly and frail, had spent the majority of their later lives in a kind of suspended grief, waiting for answers that came too late to restore what had been taken. The community, which had moved on long ago, suddenly found itself confronting a truth it had not wanted to see. Clear's throat. There are cases that linger in the collective memory, not because of their brutality or their complexity, but because of what they reveal about the fragility of safety, the unpredictability of violence, and the persistence of those who refuse to let the disappeared be forgotten. Jennifer Hawkins was 28 years old when her life ended in a wooded area on a cold February morning. She had plans. She had a family who loved her. She had a future that was stolen by someone who could not accept a simple word: no. The case serves as a reminder that cold does not mean closed, that time does not erase truth, and that sometimes, after years of silence, a voice emerges. Sarah Mitchell, the woman who waited 18 years to share what she had seen, became an unexpected catalyst. Her courage, however delayed, broke open a case that had seemed permanently sealed. Her testimony, combined with advances in technology and the dogged determination of investigators who refused to let Jennifer's file gather dust, brought a measure of resolution. David Brennan will spend the rest of his life behind bars. It is not enough. It never is. But it is something. The Hawkins family can finally lay their daughter to rest, can finally stop waiting for a phone call that will never come, can finally close a chapter that has defined their lives for nearly 2 decades. The community of Bowie, which had largely forgotten Jennifer's name, remembered it again. Vigils were held. Her photograph appeared in the local paper. People who had known her shared memories on social media, small stories about her kindness, her laughter, the way she always remembered your name. In death, as in life, she was not a headline or a statistic. She was a person, someone who mattered, someone whose absence left a void that could never be filled. The swing hung still. The toy truck lay on its side. But Jennifer Hawkins was no longer lost. She was found. She was remembered. And the man who took her from the world will carry the weight of that act for the remainder of his days. If this story mattered to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share the episode. Someone somewhere may still be waiting to be heard.